All right. Fire evacuation, 2 means of egress out of the council chambers. First one is directly behind you guys, in front of the podium here. Go out the doors, take a right down into the driveway. Second is to our left, your right. Take the first door, down the stairs, straight out into the parking lot. Can we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Secretary, legal notice, please.
Before we move into legal notice, Mr. Chairman, can we move item number 6 after item number 9? I make a motion to move item number 6, old business, to after item number 9.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye. ZBA 2018-0524, 4 Bridges Road, application to vary section 4.10.3 to reduce the required rear yard setback to 21 feet where 35 feet is required. Mitchell Krakunis, owner applicant, map 080, lot 0198, residential 33, R33 zone. 62518, and could you please tell me what these initials mean? What's DOR and MOPH?
That's date of receipt and mandatory open public hearing date.
Okay. And the Enfield Zoning Board of Appeals will hold public hearings on Monday, June 25th, 2018 at 7:30 p.m. in the Council Chambers Town Hall, 820 Enfield Street, Enfield, Connecticut. Date, this 14th day of June 2018, Mary Ann Turner, Secretary.
Okay, will the applicant come forward? Before we get going, just a little bit on how we're going to conduct business tonight. The Secretary reads the legal notice as she's done. The applicant will be asked to come forward. The applicant will state their name and address for the record, present their application, and questions from the board may be asked. The audience will be given an opportunity to speak in favor or against the application. If the audience does speak in favor or against the application, the applicant will have final opportunity for comment. Additional information shall not be submitted additional information not submitted with the application shall be presented while the public hearing is open. Once the public hearing is closed, no information will be accepted for review by the board. Comments made by the public that are not relevant to the exercise of the Commission's statutory or regulatory authority will not be considered by the Commission for reaching its decision. Once the applicant has been presented, the public hearing will be closed. The applicant may have a seat in the audience while the board conducts its discussion and most likely make a decision. The applicant is welcome to stay for the remainder of the hearings, but it's not necessary. Written confirmation of the board's decision will be received from the town. Definition of when a variance can be granted. A variance can be granted when such a grant will not affect the overall purpose of the zoning ordinance, and where the strict interpretation of the ordinance will result in a hardship. A hardship exists where the zoning ordinance uniquely affects a parcel of land differently from other parcels, and where the use of the property or reasonable use of the land would be impossible without a variance. Self-imposed or financial hardships cannot by law be considered as a reason for granting a variance. Can you state your name and address for the board, please?
Mitchell Krakunis, 4 Bridges Road, Enfield, Connecticut.
And go ahead with your application.
I'd like to shorten the width between
Is the red light on the microphone on?
Yes.
Okay.
I'd like to shorten the border between my backyard from the 35 needed to 21 feet.
Okay. Could you elaborate as to?
I want to put a deck on the back of my house.
Okay, and what is the land causing?
I'm not, from the back of my house to where the property is behind my house right now is approximately 31 feet, not even the 35 that's needed for the border. So I just want to add a deck to my house and shorten that to 21 feet. It's a 10-foot deck onto the back of my house. I have the side 10 feet needed for either side of the house. I just don't have what's needed for the back of the deck to the neighbor behind me.
Okay. All done?
Done.
Any questions of the board?
I went out to see the property. You have no backyard.
It-
So I can understand what's happening. If those of you who did not have the opportunity, there are 6 houses on the parcel of land that his house happens to sit as one of. And his backyard literally consists of less, I would say, from here to where he's sitting. So the property does cause the issue for him to have this deck. And not that it matters, but all of his neighbors surrounding him have decks.
So normally in an R33 district, you need 33,000 square feet as well, but the regulations do provide for properties that are smaller than 33,000 square feet. In this case, their property is smaller than 33,000 square feet, and those regulations that are in place are meant to provide some sort of relief. In this case, the house was already built within the setbacks, so that makes it a little more difficult to then put something like a shed or a deck or a pool on in their backyard. So that's one thing we took into account when we took in the application as well.
I do have one question on your application, or Jen, can you answer it? Under the description, describe your application. It says wanted to add 1N. What's a 1N? And are you making it 11 feet or 10? You're inconsistent.
The deck is set with a foot for the step. It would be 11 feet. I apologize. The deck is 10 with a one-step.
Aren't you
foot.
bringing the deck to the edge of the house so it's even?
Yeah, but when I have you have a foot step off your deck.
Into the
It's
yard.
not
He
going
needs
to.
to
Oh,
get off
into
the
the
deck when he's
yard.
on it.
Into the yard.
Not
Step
from the
down.
house to
Right.
the deck, from the deck to the
deck
yard
to-
out.
Yes.
Well, how high are you making this deck? I
Just-
didn't get
just-
the impression it
just
was
as-
very
Just as high
tall.
as the step is there now.
Right, it looked like you were just gonna be stepping off
There's one step
like
up.
I did coming out of the
Yes.
backyard.
Yeah, it's just one step down.
Okay. Do you have any idea what the 1N meant?
It appears to be just a typo. I think they meant one deck.
That's what I thought. I don't have any other questions. But I do want to be sure, Jen, on the diagram here, it says it's 22 by 11. If it's 22 by 10 with the step, is that how this diagram should look?
I think he wants to make the step go all the way around. That's
Yes,
how I'm
all
reading
the
it.
three,
Yeah,
correct.
that's what I-
Steps a foot on each side and
Right,
one
so
out the
no
end.
matter how you go, okay.
Yes.
Just, because I think that's what you're trying to tell me.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, ma'am.
And he's okay with the percentage? Because you said he's under 33,000 square feet. Percentage was
Yeah,
okay?
the lot
I
coverage
just
is
want to make
okay.
sure.
Yeah.
Hate to go through all this and then he can't do anything. Any other questions of the board?
Nothing.
Okay. Motion to accept, motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve.
Oh, wait, can't do
You
that
have to-
yet.
No,
Yeah.
I need to close the public hearing.
No, can't do that yet.
Okay.
Go ahead, have a seat.
Thank you.
Oh, yes.
Is there
the
anybody,
public
it's a
hearing.
public hearing. See, I was thinking
Yeah, yeah.
later on in the night.
Okay.
Anybody in the audience wishing to speak in favor or against the application? Anybody in the audience wishing to speak in favor or against the application? Anybody in the audience wishing to speak in favor or against the application? Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Public hearing is closed. Any discussion?
I described it already. There's no backyard. It's very,
Right,
it's very short.
I mean, his neighbors have decks. He was built already in the setback.
Right,
Right.
So that's kind of not his
right.
fault.
So,
And it's 5,000 square foot planning in a R33 zone, which
Right.
is really the hardship that
right.
none of them created.
Right. All right. All those in favor of
Should we
accept-
make a motion?
Yep, I thought
I-
you did that already.
Well, we could do it your way.
No, go ahead.
I make a motion that we accept ZBA 2018-05-24 for Bridge Road for the 21 feet, the yard setback where 35 is required.
I second.
Made by Mary Ann, seconded by Charlie. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? Motion carries.
So Andrew, let's, we gotta put our copy on this piece of paper, so tell me what you just said.
That it's a 5,000 square foot zoning scheme that's happens to fall in an R33 zone, so all the neighbors are right about the same size, really small.
Um, And the property, there is no depth to the yard. Do we want to put that in the,
Yeah, absolutely. It's a 96 foot deep lot.
Can you tell me it's been approved so you can leave?
Hmm?
Can you tell me it's been approved so you can leave?
Yeah. All right, you've been approved for your deck.
They start building tomorrow?
No, you have to. That all depends how quick everything gets done, but I don't believe you'd be gonna be able to build tomorrow.
Thank you.
let's see if I got something here. The 5,000 square foot zoning scheme where all the areas smaller than the R33 zone requires the property, is required. The property is a 96-foot deep lot, thus the deck would not fit within without the variance.
Yep.
So, board member. Who said, Kelly, you second?
Charlie.
Charlie.
Read the legal notice.
I need that back. I can.
I don't want to mess you up.
Yeah, I want to make sure I put them in the right form this time. Zoning Board of Appeals will hear public hearings on Monday, June 25th at 7:30 in the council chambers for ZBA 2018-05-23, 561 Hazard Avenue. Applicant to vary Section 10.10.7A VI to reduce the minimum landscape separation of all parking spaces and driveway aisles from the building to 2.2, where 10 feet is required on the north side of the proposed O'Reilly Auto Parts building, and 5.0 feet, where 10 feet is required on the east side of the proposed O'Reilly's Auto Parts building. O'Reilly Automotive Stores, Inc., parts owner, O'Reilly Auto Parts applicant, map 110, lot 0387, business local BL zone within the Skidco Design Overlay District, dated the 14th day of June 2018, Mary Ann Turner, secretary.
You're on camera, so the camera will pick it up over here.
Right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Correct.
State your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, folks. Randy Myron with Bowler Engineering. Address is 352 Turnpike Road, Southborough, Massachusetts.
Excuse me for a second.
Yep.
Are you saying that you can't sit up here? His friend is one of the people, but he's not one of the voters tonight.
Chad, do you need these?
You wouldn't be able to participate in discussion. So,
You want to put it on the record?
yes, go ahead and
Put it
state
on
on
the
the
record.
record.
So just want to, for the record, clarify that I am personal friends with one of the address property owners listed on the back of Form A2, Mr. Roger C. Frangemore of 22 Royal Manor, Somers, Connecticut, 06071. But I will not be participating in the discussion or any of the voting, but just to keep it above board and transparent. Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, good?
Yep.
Okay. Hi, folks. So this is the lot in question. It's 561 Hazard Ave. It's a 33,000 square foot lot. It's currently an abandoned Webster Bank with a drive-through and a parking lot. The plan that's shown on that easel is essentially the proposed site plan overlaid onto an existing aerial image. And a couple things I just want to call your attention to relative to the existing lot is that it currently doesn't comply with some of the landscaping standards within the zoning regulations. The regulations call for a 10-foot buffer, basically around all property lines. And there's pavement and parking spaces right up against some of the property lines currently. It also currently doesn't comply with the 10-foot parking setback from a building, 10-foot parking or...
Can I ask you a big favor?
Sure,
Could you grab the microphone and go up there and point at what you're telling me?
sure.
Yep.
This?
There should be a button on there.
Oh, I see. Sorry. Is that good? No?
Yep.
Yeah?
Yep.
Okay. So this is the lot. Currently, as I was stating, there's pavement and parking associated with the existing Webster Bank. It's actually it's a little bit tough to see in this aerial image, but it's right up against this rear property line, maybe a couple feet away from it. And there's also parking right up against this property line here. In addition, there's also parking or a drive aisle into the there's a 25-foot, I think, front landscape buffer. So it currently doesn't encroach, or I'm sorry, it currently doesn't comply with those requirements. In addition to that, it also has parking within 10 feet of the building. So the project in front of you, or the request in front of you, is for a relief from the 10-foot parking setback from a building. Sorry. The project itself is at 7,200 square foot O'Reilly Auto Parts with 22 parking spaces. It's proposed to be fully compliant with the zoning regulations, with the exception of this request, of this variance request that's in front of you folks tonight, to allow parking within 10 feet of the building. There's parking. So the yellow line is the new O'Reilly layout. There's parking within, I think, 2.2 feet of the building along this side, and there's parking within 5 feet along the front of the building here. And really, the reason for our request of the variance is because there's just the lot the lot area is slightly above the minimum required within this zoning district. But when you take into account all the other setbacks for buildings and landscaping and parking, there's just really little room to work with while still meeting the parking requirements. This project itself requires 21 parking spaces, and there's 22 shown. Typically, O'Reilly likes to have like 30 to 35, but there's just no room to fit them in on this particular lot. So that's really the request that's in front of you folks tonight. We don't feel that it's a negative impact to any of the surrounding neighbors. If anything, it would probably be a benefit because we're going to be increasing the buffers surrounding the property lot, surrounding the parking lot, and adding some landscaping. I do have a landscape plan here too. We haven't formally filed anything with the Planning and Zoning Commission in terms of the site plan approval application, but if you're comfortable with this request, this would be our next step here in proposing significant amount of landscaping to help kind of freshen up the property. There'd be a new stormwater management system, new utilities, and all that other stuff. So that's pretty much it.
How many feet? Here, 35 feet?
Yeah.
This is supposed to be the whole building, that's this thing. On the plans that you gave us, you have a dotted line around the words where it says O'Reilly Auto Parts, but you have the whole square, and that's why I was curious to see what this means.
Probably their store, and this is their storage for.
Yep.
But it's in the same building. Your building,
Yeah.
it's going to be a building, and what you use inside.
Right, so that's exactly what it is. It's that dashed line represents the sales
Sale
floor
part.
area, the area where parts are sold. That's
Right.
that's only open to the public. The other remaining portion of the building is simply storage, for storage of automotive parts.
Question through you to Jen. Could you please pull up the site plan? You remember when I wanted to get some information about the Skidco overlay district, and I wasn't able to quickly find it. Could you please pull that up and tell me where that is in the regulation book? I was curious, are you planning on, it's going to be one way in and one way out? Where's your entrance? Is it on the front part is Hazard Avenue where you're putting the green, and then it's back, but you're not driving around the building.
Right, so we're essentially maintaining the access that's out there today. There's access through the adjacent parcel, through this.
Right, it's a big
shopping
park,
plaza.
right.
Right, and we're just maintaining that access. It's proposed to be two-way, both ways, and that's to accommodate delivery trucks. Delivery trucks could come in through this direction and then back up. This is their loading area and back in here.
Right, because the bank you could drive through because they had a drive-through, and they went around. And when I was out the property, I was like, where were you gonna put if you were planning on having a round? Because is there something to do with the fire department? Just a question. You know this stuff.
Well, the fire, that's something he's gonna have to bring up with PZC. Typically, the fire department would not want access to the back of the building.
Yep, we do send applications for planning and zoning over to the fire department for review and comment. So, and you were looking for the Skidco Design Overlay District, that's section 8.75 on page 87. Basically, that just says that it gives the Planning and Zoning Commission the right under a special permit review to look at the architectural design of the building and how harmonious it is with the uses and buildings around it. And one of the things that is required in that section is they can't have any parking in between the building and the street.
Right. But when I was out there, and I understand the Skidco overlay was decided in September of 17, but the whole area, every business in that area, even including the lawyer's office, actually I think they were accountants, every one of them has parking right up at the building.
Correct.
All the way down the street.
Right.
And this
Right.
property isn't large enough. If he had the opportunity that McDonald's has, for example, I went out there and measured, they could move back, and they have parking on all three sides. But they could go back. There's no going back here. They're gonna run into the accountant's building if they even had the space. So I'm finding it a little difficult, like it would be difficult for them to accommodate and hit the parking requirements, which I think are pretty vital for his business. So that's why I was curious about this design overlay.
And like you said, everybody else has the parking
Right.
right against.
Right, we're making, because he's taking down a building, he has to now conform to the new regulation, and that's why he's here for the variance.
I understand that, but I'm looking at the requirements on the Skidco design overlay, and that's why I asked for the section, because I was having trouble finding it.
So on the north side of this, where you're gonna be 2.5 feet from the building. So on the side facing McDonald's, you're gonna be 5 feet. I'm assuming there's a sidewalk there?
That's correct.
On the north side, is there a sidewalk there as well?
There isn't. There is a small walkway, but there is no like formal sidewalk. I will say though that there are wheel stops in front of all of the parking spaces. You know, God forbid should anybody ever try to drive into the building, right?
I'm just looking for safety of people that park there and get out, making sure that they have, you know, if they're that close to the building, making sure that they have an area to walk.
Yep.
Do we have a map of where the Skidco design overlay district actually is?
I did not bring a full copy of the zoning map. I can run up and get one if you would like, but
Okay.
it's pretty much between where Hazardville is on Hazard Avenue. It's just to the east. Yeah, the east, going towards to Summers. So it goes all the way to the, I believe, to the end of the of Enfield on Hazard Avenue.
Starts at the intersection of Elm and South Road and runs to the east, to the Summers town line.
But didn't we just put in some medical buildings in that area?
Nope, that's
I'm
further
too-
west.
That's
I'm
further to the west.
West, okay.
Yep. Any other questions of the board?
He answered the ones that I had.
I just had a question about going back to the Alta survey that you gave us of the whole site.
Yep.
There's a reference to a use of parking spaces, which I guess was granted in 1989. What's the story with that? Are you planning to still make use of that, or was that like a license that's expired?
We can look into that. As far as I know, it's not still valid. I mean,
Okay.
O'Reilly wants to have their parking on their property lot, on their own property.
Right. No, I
They-
just didn't know if that was something you were considering in this, since you said you were short. And
Right.
Anybody else?
So do we have enough is the 21 parking spaces the number that they would need for this?
Yes.
Thank you.
Planning staff suggested a couple of options with the applicants, and I believe we detailed them in the in your staff report about maybe doing like a shared parking agreement between the nearby shopping center, but you know, that's not on their property, so if they don't want to do that, you can't really make them. So.
Yeah, I mean, I know just from a customer convenience standpoint, they would like parking spaces on their own lot, obviously as close to the building as possible.
Could you show me the landscaping again?
Sure. Just keep in mind that this hasn't been.
I know, it's just a hint.
Right. Yep.
So where do you see the sidewalk?
So, right here, here's.
Right in front of-
McDonald's is here, so
right.
there's a sidewalk here,
Right in front of the
and then
building.
there's a 2.5-foot walkway here with no sidewalk. So that would be just black. But he said there's parking stops
Right.
there,
Right, right,
so.
okay. I don't have any other questions.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Anything else you want to add?
Nope.
Okay. Anybody in the audience wish to speak in favor or against the application? Anyone in the audience wish to speak in favor or against the application? Anybody in the audience wishing to speak in favor or against the application? Do I have a motion to?
So, hang on a minute. You're hogging my space.
So, I'll share my map.
I make a motion to accept ZBA.
We're closing the public hearing.
I make a motion to, so moved.
Second,
Second.
public hearing is closed.
Discussion.
Any discussion?
I have a question.
Okay?
Can you make those parking stops, I don't know how you would word it, but make it mandatory that they're upkept so that that 2.5-foot span is always there?
You can't really condition a variance, but planning and zoning usually looks at that sort of thing under their review as well, and I believe the building department requires things like bollards and
Yes,
stuff.
that'd be maintained.
Yep.
Pretty much anything we're looking at on that picture there,
It's just a guess.
right, I mean, we're not even seeing it.
Right, okay.
All they're here for is a variance to park closer than 10 feet
Okay,
to the building. How they maintain that distance away from the building is gonna have to come from PZC.
and it usually is.
If we approve them to park closer than
Okay.
10 feet. So.
Good.
Anybody else have discussion?
Some of the things when I was out there, and I understand wanting to get the SCEDCO overlay up and running, but this is an abandoned building. It would really clean up the area. It's a clean business, and I looked at every single thing around it for quite a distance, and every one of them park exactly the way he needs it to park.
They look like this.
They look like this.
This is very indicative to any auto parts store or anything in that type of industry. So
Exactly.
he's not asking for anything out of the ordinary.
And the property doesn't, they've already shown, and I know that we could put a little pressure on you to make the building smaller, but that just makes your business more difficult. And you've already made concessions to that to make it fit. And I believe that having the right amount of parking spaces, which they just acknowledged, is very important. Would rather you didn't have less. And what I was most interested in is to make sure that you kept the buffer, or you'll have the grassy area from the
Make
end of
sure
your
you're
building.
talking to the board.
Well, I'm talking to Jen. So talk that the green, excuse me, to make sure that the greenery that went from the front out to the street was there. I was concerned about that, so. I don't know, I just see that it would be an upgrade for the area.
All right. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor signify by raising your right hand. Opposed? Motion passes. Good luck.
Thanks, folks.
Okay, try this again.
I gotta keep this here because I don't want to forget it.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Between us.
No, I don't need to make it more difficult. That's right.
I had to think about that for a second.
Okay, let's see if I got this. The property will take an abandoned building and give a fresh new business to the area. The parking request is reasonable per the surrounding area, and because the building will provide the correct number of required parking spaces, the variance is a reasonable request and fits into the area and other businesses. Reasonable? Okay, Charlie. Are you gonna open the maps? There's no legal notice.
There is no legal notice.
What do you want this one?
Yeah. I just figured we'd share one. So, do you want me to just read what's in our, on our agenda, or?
Yep.
Automotive location approval, ZBA 2018-0427, 710 and 718 Enfield Street. Application for the automotive location approval for a repair garage and used car dealership, Matthew J. Purcello, owner. Leah Inc., applicant, map 20029, lot 0015, business local, BL zone, within the King Street, Enfield Street Design Overlay District.
Ready for Mr.? Ready? Okay, thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members of the board. For the record, Attorney Carl Landolina, Fahey and Landolina, 487 Spring Street, Windsor Locks. I'm here representing the applicant, Layla Inc. The principal of Layla Inc. is behind me, gentleman in the front row, Mr. Youssef. He has a contract to purchase 710-718 Enfield Street from the estate of Matthew Porcello. You should have an application in front of you. Included in that is a housekeeping matter, are a copy of the deed to the property. Mr. Porcello, the current owner of the estate of, acquired the property from, I assume, a family member back in 1984. I also have attached two separate letters. There are two co-executrixes of the estate of Matthew Porcello, and each one of them has signed off giving us permission to pursue this application on behalf of the estate and on behalf of the contract purchaser. I'm sure you're more familiar with the property than I am. This has been in an automotive use, my understanding is, since its inception back in the 1930s, I believe. At one time, they did sell gasoline. The gas tanks were removed in 2015, and Mr. Porcello operated just the general repairs business in the building on 710. 718 is a mixed-use building. On the first floor, there's office space. There are 3 apartments, I believe. One is in the basement? Yes. And 2 are above on the second floor. So, so he proposes to continue the use that's been ongoing there for decades. As you can see on the site plan, there's some, I'll just point out these things for your attention. There's some concrete pads shown in some gravel area. One of at least those pads and some islands and such are actually within the state right-of-way. They're not in the, obviously the roadway, but they're in the state right-of-way. And I suspect that's where the gasoline was first sold out of pumps on those concrete pads, probably in the state right-of-way. But as I say, the pumps have been gone for a while. The tanks were removed in 2015. And just, again, for your information, in case you're interested, we just received an email from the Department of Environmental Energy and Environmental Protection today indicating that they had closed their file on the removal of those tanks. And that's all you're going to get from DEEP is an email saying they're fine, they've closed their file. They don't provide any kind of letter saying, you know, there's no issues over there. They just will not do that. But that's been taken care of. So my client intends to use the property as it's been used, as I said, for many years. I did get a phone call about a week or so ago, no, an email June 8th, I think, from Mr. Rochelle indicating that they wanted to see where the spaces for the used cars. So we provided 4 vehicle display spaces on the southerly portion of the property abutting the JPD Properties LLC parcel to the south. So all of those spaces are outside of the right-of-way. Selling cars is not going to be the primary business. The primary business will be the general automotive repair in the large building at 710 as sort of a side business or accessory business. Many of these types of operations sell a few used cars here and there. In the southwest corner is a fairly large area behind 718 and to the sort of side of 710. That's a vehicle recovery area. Mr. Porcello had a towing business there as well. My client would probably like to, if he's so inclined, to tow cars as well. And you're required under state motor vehicle regulations to have a totally fenced-in area when you tow a car to your lot. So that area is all fenced in. I will tell you that in the 1980s, there was a variance granted to Mr. Porcello, as I understand it, to create a parking area essentially up to a certain distance of the property line for that recovery area. And this commission back in the 80s gave that variance to him, conditioned on the place being fenced in, which it is, and it would have to have been anyway for him to get a towing license. So that's pretty much it. When Mr. O'Brien was still occupying his office, he did call me back, I want to say in May, and we had a discussion regarding the used car sales operation, and there was a lack of information, I guess, in old files at the Planning and Zoning Commission as to when that occurred, how that occurred. So I was able to obtain from the DMV, and I think that's probably in your package today, certified copies of documents saying that the used car sales license has been continuously operated or given at this property since 1958. Now, that's where their record keeping goes back to. It could have been even further back, but that's the furthest record that they could locate, the earliest record for this property. So beginning in at least 1958, the Porcello family was selling a few used cars out of this location. So we don't intend to make any changes in the exterior of the building. We're going to, along the way, he might change out some of the bay doors. They're in need of repair, but essentially he's going to operate within the existing footprint of both the buildings that are currently there. So as you know, all right, the legislature, their infinite wisdom, in 2003, decided to repeal that portion of the motor vehicle statutes which required a public hearing on these, and also at the same time, whether they did so knowingly or not, although the law says we're presumed that to think that the legislature knows what it's doing, but they also took out the portions of the statute that held the criteria in there. One thing you could look at was prior to 2003 with the proximity as schools and playgrounds and that kind of stuff, and that's been gutted from the statute. So when they did away with the public hearing requirement, they did away with all of that. So I did see a memo from your town attorney describing giving you advice of what she thought your area of inquiry could be, and I read it. I don't really have an objection to what she said. As a town attorney, I've given the same opinion to other boards and commissions lately. So that's all the information I have. At this point, I'll be glad to address any questions or comments that you may have.
Questions?
A few.
Okay.
Through you to Jen. Does this applicant fall and comply with our zoning regulations? Because I wasn't really sure which ones that they...
There are setback requirements and items on this property that do not meet the current zoning regulations, no. I know that in discussion about that variance, we were able to pull the old file for ZBA regarding it, the chain link parking area abutting the residential properties, and so that was allowed. But other than that, it's two different properties, which isn't commonly allowed to be used as one property with one business on it. But historically, according to the town attorney, because it was used that way in the past, and there's no other documentation saying that wasn't allowed in the past. This sort of stands as it is.
So your answer is they're not in compliance, but because they have been non-conforming for so long?
Right.
Is that your answer?
Yep.
So I want to talk about the parking.
Mm-hmm.
I see that on your plan, you've added 4 parking spaces to the left side. And I was driving out on the property today and looking it all over, and I'm very curious. You have 3 apartments in this building, on this lot. Where do they park?
So actually, I happened to be out there when we were looking at where we could put some few parking spaces for the displays of the motor vehicles that were being sold, and one of the tenants happened to be arriving. One of the tenants tells me that they generally park near the steps to the south end of 718. So they just pull up and park in that area. And actually, one of the current tenants doesn't have a vehicle, but the other tenant parks generally in between the property edge or property line and the 718, so in front of the building.
So you don't have any parking for them, technically,
There's
right
no-
now? They
there's
just
no-
kind of
there's
pull
no-
up and stop.
There's no line parking anywhere on the site.
Right, so.
Correct. Yep.
So the parking would be, the apartments don't have parking right now designated. How many employees and where will they park?
There is room, I think the employees would be allowed to park in the recovery area. It's fairly large back there. And there is the entire northwest corner, essentially the entire site is paved, but I assume that employees either park there or in the recovery lot.
The northwest corner is the opening going into the garage bays. Is that what you're talking about?
Correct.
So they
yes.
can't park in front of the garage bays?
No, but there is,
They can't park on the street because that street's pretty narrow.
yeah, there's
And it's only-
room for cars to park along that westerly, if you drive in from Carpet Street, and essentially you can drive in almost anywhere, there's no curbed
Right.
entrance, and you pull up, you can pull up to the chain link fence, there's 44 feet of space.
Are you
along
on the
north-
left side of the building?
Yeah,
Because
say if you-
Carpet Street,
yeah, it's on the right.
right,
If
the
I'm-
building goes almost literally to the end of where the street starts.
Yeah, there's.
So
a
there's no
6
parking there.
There's 6 feet. I'm saying to the, if you look at the, if you look at the top of the map,
Yeah,
that's where I'm saying is if you drove in from Carpet Street,
but you'd be parking in front of the bays.
no, you could actually drive up and, well, there's room here along this northerly boundary of the property.
You're right here?
Yeah, I don't know where you're looking, but.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think that's very deep that'll even hold a car unless you think you're gonna parallel park them. And then they're gonna be hanging out on the street.
Well, there's 95 feet of space there.
Right, but that's not, it doesn't
Yep.
seem that it's wide
So,
enough.
also, if you look at, I mean, I don't know where currently where they park,
Yeah,
but
I-
there's some room, there's
I
two
think I
overhead
can
doors
tell
there.
here.
There's some space
Not-
near where the
not-
concrete, the AC pads are.
Okay,
Yeah.
so do you, I know you can't look at we don't have one for you to point at, which would have been really helpful. Because I know that the parking is definitely something to consider. And I don't see any place here for your apartment people, because they're not always gonna not have cars. Your employees, I have no idea how many there'll be, so there's an issue there. And the sale of vehicles, which I don't, those 4 spots are gonna be very, very busy. You know, so, and then I also was looking at the documents that you shared with us, the K7 forms. There's 2. And I don't think they supersede each other.
I'm sorry, what are you referring to?
The K7 forms that you got from the Department of Motor Vehicles, you gave us 2. One says that the type of use will be used cars, and then you gave me the second one, gave the board one that's circled, or it's checkmarked new cars. And I'm going to be under I don't believe they supersede each other. I think they're in they're conjunction with.
Can I see what you're looking, because that's not part of my application. I'm not sure where.
There was the attachment that you gave with your narrative. With your narrative? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So you gave us this, and so it talks here, and then you gave me a second one,
Yeah, those are,
and you gave me this here.
those are the old permits from the 50s.
Right, but aren't you telling me that these permits are still what when you started chatting, you were talking about these 2, I'm gonna call them the K7s because I don't wanna get messed up. the-
Okay,
Okay,
yes.
so are you telling me that these are going to stay in play, or that these are going away and you gotta get new ones?
We have to get our own permits. The permits are personal. They don't run with the property. They're personal, so we have to get our own permits.
So what you're
That's the
trying
reason
to,
for being here, yeah.
so what you're trying to show us is that they've had them since the 50s.
Yes.
These are what they had, new and used.
I-
What are you asking for?
Used cars, we're not, we wouldn't qualify as, under today's regs, we would not qualify as a new car dealer.
On-
So,
On the K7, so you have the one that says X675. The other one, the D1004, at the top, it says change from new car dealer. So I think this one supersedes the, it's hard to read the date, but I think it's a newer date.
Yeah.
Well,
So
in
the
any
new
event, we would
cars-
not be selling new cars. Because if you
Okay.
sell new cars, you have to have a parts department, you have to have so much of a repairs area. This location would never be able to sell used cars, or new cars, under the current motor vehicle regulations.
So, we don't have any idea of what you would do for parking for the apartment people. We don't have an idea of what you would do for the parking for the employees. You do have an idea that you're going to sell only 4 used cars.
Now, well, that's a display area. If he, to the extent that he might have additional cars, they would all be located within the recovery area.
Well, you also said you want to have a towing business, and I noticed that in the impound lot, there's probably a half a dozen cars still there.
Right, they belong to Mr. Porcello, I assume. They're
So
gonna
I
be
don't,
removed.
I would think he's not going to move them.
No, that's, well, he has to move them. They're part of the, we're not buying the place if they're not removed. Those are
Where are you going
junk
to put
cars.
the tow truck?
Probably, when it's not being used, it'll be parked in the building.
In the bay?
Where's it?
That's where they've been parked
I'm sorry.
most recently.
I'm going to ask the, Mr. Corvo to join us. He's the real estate agent in the project. He knows more about the site and its current use than I do.
Excuse me, at old age, I'm moving a little slowly. No one told me to be like this. I'm familiar with Porcello's dating back into the 1970s. My name is Robert Corvo. I live at 7 Shepherd Lane, Enfield, Connecticut. I'm also the real estate agent for the property. I had known Matt for 35, 40 years. And I know the building. I know how Matt used it. I used to work right across the street from that facility. Out my window, I could see Matt's business operating. It was unbelievable in those days. So the question was, right now, over the past several years, Matt has actually kept the tow trucks and the wrecker parked inside the building and in 2 of the bays. And as I understand it, Mr. Youssef is not looking to operate the type of repair business that Matt had. Matt had 17 employees. I believe Mr. Youssef is going to be himself and maybe one other employee with, I don't believe, doing a lot of retail. That's what I was told. But I'm not certain.
Mr. Youssef.
Is that correct, that you're not planning to have a huge repair business on the operation? You're going to have 1 or 2 employees?
If he's gonna
Yeah.
communicate.
Yeah, hold on a second. Yeah, come on up and take a seat.
Microphone, okay.
Yeah, just state your name and address.
Please.
Yeah. My name is Muhammad Yusuf, 1162 Anfield Street, Anfield, Connecticut. Thank you. There's no answer for this question because the place is big. You're not going to have 2 people only working there. I don't want to say 2 people, later on be 6.
But you would, if you were to operate a recovery business, you park the tow trucks inside the building, is that correct?
It's going to be maybe in a recovery area or in
Inside the building?
inside the building if it's not really.
How many bays do you have?
Right now they have 4 left.
4 lists, 5 bays.
And how many employees are you thinking?
Because everything go through, maybe 6. Because you need somebody to be in the front, you need somebody for sales, 2, 3 guys repair.
Where are your customers going to park?
Usually maybe in the recovery area. If he just come, when he puts the car recovery area, when he is ready
Don't they
with
drop their cars off here?
re-
I'm currently, my understanding is they drop the cars off in this northwest corner.
On the concrete pad?
It's, no, where, in the map, it says 710 Enfield Street lot area, and the entire area is paved,
Off of Carpet Street.
right?
But it's in front of the 2 bays, the doors of the bays. It's not in the front of your building. So you're saying that your customers will go around the back, drop their car, walk to the front?
I suppose so. I'm sure that's probably what they do now. I mean, unfortunately, we're limited by what's there now. I'm sure some people probably, pull up in front of the building, all right? And I'm sure there is some jockeying of cars as they pull cars in when they work on them and pull them out, and there's room in the storage area. They would store them there until people pick them up in the evening. And cars are being jockeyed around in this northwest corner of the property. Is that a fair statement?
The park,
I'm sorry?
Years ago, usually customers would pull in the front of the
you might
building.
need to lean into the mic.
Years ago, customers used to pull in front of the building, and then they would go in. They usually had an appointment. One of the employees would take the car and bring it either to one of the bays. If you come into the bays off of Carpet Street, actually where the wording is, I believe that's Carpet Street. Yeah, this is Carpet. Where the wording is 710 Enfield Street lot with the 10,000.003. There's enough room there to pull cars in, plus have another 2 or 3 actual working bays to the left of where the
I'm having trouble understanding where you're talking about.
The recovery area.
That's here?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, at least
What's a recovery area?
That's where the tow truck's gonna come in and drop off cars.
Yeah, but they're not going to put them in the impound? They can't drop the cars, or there's no way.
That's what we're calling impound. It's called recovery area.
Oh, so it's, now you got me confused.
What he's talking about now is this area right here.
You want
There
to,
are
sorry,
two big-
Carl,
Yeah.
you got to grab the mic.
Okay,
Sorry.
all right.
Excuse me, Jen, could we get him an easel, and let's see if we can help him with this? Could you hold on one second, Attorney Landolina?
All of this, up to wherever the fence, oh yeah, up to this. Right
You
up to the
can't drive
corner.
around it.
Right, up to the corners, there's a fencing.
There's a fence.
in there. So I
can't-
think this was the recovery.
Right, that's the, that's the impound lot.
So how are they getting in over here then?
You have to come in through here.
There's no, you can't drive through this building and come out into
I
this?
believe there were doors here, but I couldn't get back there to look.
If I was an engineer, I would have thought about this part of it.
Well, you know, we'll take a minute.
He would know, Mary Ann.
Pardon?
Ask him that question.
Go ahead.
How do I explain where this is?
Are there doors on the impound lot going in both directions? When you go around Carpet Street, the bays enter from this side. Are there doors on the opposite side so they come
So
into
you
the
drive
impound
through?
lot?
No, there aren't. No.
No?
No.
I have a couple clips if you need them. God bless. Keep going.
Bless you.
Here you go. Let's see if we can fake this.
I'm a lawyer, that's all we do.
But the license is only for one property.
There's no license, I just pulled it.
Are we trying to,
License is that property.
Do you want me to hold that? Might make it easier.
That's the question I have.
I'm not sure, I'm not really going down the rabbit hole we're gonna run.
No, I'm just pointing out that it was,
Okay.
Weber,
Forms.
there is,
So on my fancy easel, I now have a rendering of the property. So I think what we were talking about was this area right here. There are 2 bay doors here. There are some doors in the front. So, as Mr. Corvo said, that traditionally people have pulled up here, entered in. This is not like a quick loop kind of place. Generally speaking, people would have appointments, and then the cars would then be jockeyed around into the building. It's fairly large. Looks like, I mean, it's 41 this dimension. So there's room for a number of cars actually in the interior of the building. So I suspect that given the how much business is being conducted that day, cars might sit out here for a few minutes. They might be jockeyed back into this area but probably looks like you'd have room for 7 or 8 vehicles inside the building itself. This is what I refer to as a recovery area, this chain link area. Impound is another word for it. There's a sliding fence over here. And again, under DMV regulations, if you tow a car and you need a place to store it in a locked area, and so that's why that has to be there. You can't tow cars without a wrecker. At this point, I don't think that's in the cards for him immediately, but he may, if he's successful, go out and spend the money on a wrecker. But there's plenty of room. I know, Mrs. Turner, that you said you were out there, and I noticed myself, there's a number of cars sort of on this and over here.
On both sides.
Yeah, there was like, I counted 5 or 6, I think something like, and there was still plenty of room in that impound area. So, I mean, that area looks to be 90 by, it's by 50 or something greater than that. So, there's room back there for a lot of cars. If we needed to park cars back there, that's what he'd do. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
So, one of my, we're going to continue on the parking discussion. There's the sidewalk. I mean, I see some issues for people to try to, besides the fact that you may have customers come and want to get into this property, which has no curbing. I mean, you could come in from all directions. You have a pedestrian, I have a pedestrian concern. There's the state sidewalk there, which looks like you might be in the right-of-way to Route 5.
Yeah, it's absolutely in the right-of-way. It's not on our property.
So, I mean, besides the lack of parking for anybody who's just coming to work and live there and stuff, and the customers trying to come and go, that is a pretty walkable area. And that area that you're talking about with the concrete pad and the gravel, I mean, you literally are right there at the sidewalk. And Route 5. And that Route 5 is a pretty busy place now. It's not even, I wasn't here in the 57 or 58 to know what it was like, but I'm pretty sure it's busier now.
I would probably agree with you. This business was operated full-time right up to Mr. Porcello's death in 15, 16. When did he pass away?
Last year.
17. So.
I believe the business has been closed a while.
Matt maintained all the licenses, and he had a gentleman that he had hired that did repairs in the building, operated the wrecker. Operated the wrecker and the car carriers. He had a total of 2 car carriers and I believe 1 wrecker.
And when was that? As of last year?
Right up until last year. His license was finally terminated after his death by his daughter April of this year. So he was fully licensed right up and through this year.
So are those assets of the wreckers being part of this?
They're not a part of the sale.
Okay.
I believe a lot of the vehicles have been sold or are going to be sold. But the condition of the sale, I'm not Mr. Youssef's agent. I'm the agent for the seller. But according to the sale, the property should be vacated, all the vehicles gone, and/or he can make offers to purchase them or what have you. But when the sale takes place, all the vehicles will be gone from the building. Matt told me that he had as many as 30 vehicles in the impound area parked there. He also, if there were cars in the repair stalls in the 2 bays off the back of Carpet Street, then what he would do is at nighttime leave his wrecker in car carriers there.
Where?
Off of Carpet Street in front of the bays.
So he left them outside?
Sometimes outside, sometimes inside. For the past couple of years, I've seen them inside. But if you're running a repair business and you've got cars in the bay, a lot of cars don't come in and go. They're there for a day or two. So you're not going to be able to park in the bays. You're going to have to park at night in front of the bays.
You're speaking about the wreckers, the location of the tow
Yeah.
or the wreckers.
And basically, throughout the years that I saw Purcell's in operation, you're absolutely right. It's a tight site, and the business had been expanded over the years from, I think, 1 or 2 bays to 5 bays. The building part off the back was an additional, maybe added 20, 30, 40 years ago. I have no idea how long. But Matt would just be jockeying cars all around the operation. So you are correct. You're going to have to itemize 2 or 3 car locations for the tenants. That's going to happen, and I would suggest probably to Mr. Yosef, he consider doing that in the impound lot area. There's a lot of ability to move around within there. So section off a section of 3 car slots for the tenants, and then allowing for impounded cars that have been towed in to be kept there. And then if he has vehicles that aren't in, now, the one thing, he has the 4 lifts that will house cars. There's another bay in the front that will house another car. Then when you go in off Carpet Street, you've got the 2 bays with the lifts in front of them. To the left-hand side, I've seen as many as 3 cars parked there. And I remember the cars that didn't require to be in a lift. So we're talking 5, 6, 7, 8 cars capability of storage within the building that are being worked on.
I'm up to 14, and I haven't got to the 8 you just added.
Pardon?
I'm up to 14 already, and you just gave me 8 more.
Well, I haven't been counting, but
Okay, so, because you won't be able to park on Carpet Street. There's just no space there, and it's very narrow, and it's one way, so that's going to be a difficulty.
they never parked on Carpet Street.
So let's talk about traffic. You know, Route 5 is very busy. And we're double lanes. I mean, it's just a massive amount of traffic now. Carpet Street, I know I went down there. There's many residential homes there. So I'm sure those folks don't want to be impeded upon. I noticed that the building, there's no way to get around the building. You can't get around the building. So you're moving cars seems to me that it's good because that it's an issue.
They're actually, and I don't know whether zoning would allow it or not, but where Attorney Landolino's talking about that fence to the abutting residential neighbor behind there, it appears to me that there's wide enough for a driveway to go back there to connect into the impound lot.
Right here.
Yeah, I
But-
know, but we're not, we can't
Pardon?
talk about
I don't,
that.
yeah, Bob's been very helpful, but I feel incumbent, I have to point out that according to the aerial map, even if there was enough space, there's a jog in the property line there. So I don't want to represent that we could do that because I don't think
Okay.
we could, be honest with you. I mean, you can look at the aerial map if you want.
Do we have an
one of
aerial
them.
map?
We don't know.
No, we don't.
I have only one, you can look at it, but
We're good sharers.
what he's referring to is back here, but see how 718 doesn't match up with the, so I don't know if I could get by that corner.
Hold on one second. Chairman wins.
Now, according to this map, which is obviously the aerial maps are just digitized, but this map shows that that property line goes straight across, and there's at this side
All right.
8 feet in width.
He's talking about that right in there.
Might be a little bit more over here, 8.5, but at this section it's 8.
This
So.
way.
It just seems extremely tight, so my concern is the traffic overall for the property. I mean, Route 5 is extremely busy. You've got the sidewalk in the front. You have no curbs that are going to stop people from one way or another going wherever they're going. Pedestrian traffic's impeded. It's and then you now have, you know, given me more information about a tow truck business, which means, you know, with my experience of my husband being in this business, it tow trucks are 24/7. And they're in, they're out, they're moving, you know, they're just doing their thing. Wintertime, it's crazy. I mean, it seems like a little dangerous, especially on such a tight spot. And the number of cars to put in the impound lot, we know what it can be like when you're working on cars. I mean, they can be in all different parts of work. I don't want to call them disrepair, but in process of repair. Sometimes, and when they're in the impound lot, those aren't the cars that you're working on. They have to stay inside the building at night and stuff like that, because we've had this with other discussions. It seems like the tow truck business is going to be an interesting piece. And we talked about this. I would like to understand, you mentioned something about the 1994 DMV license, but I assume that still has nothing. That was just for information that the business had it. Because when you gave me the K7s and the DMV, that was just for us to know that it was a business that did this.
Well, yes, that's correct, yes. When I asked for a motor vehicle to send certified copies of the history, whatever they gave me, that's what I gave you.
Gotcha.
I figured you were entitled to see everything that I saw.
And
so that's it.
And
But the main objective there was to point out that because, again, when Mr. O'Brien had contacted me, the issue he brought up in terms of zoning was where did the used car license come from? We don't have any record of anything like that. Right. And I said, well, let me find out. And I said in 1958, we can find a continuous record dating back to 1958 for the sale of used cars. In the statute that we're still working under, 14-54, which requires us to come here, I can find a history going back into the 40s for that statute. So, again, my assumption would be, and I like to use that word, but that some board in this town was required to sign off on that permit in 1958 when he got it, and that would have been your predecessors or some other zoning authority.
it's very possible it could have been a different zoning authority because they keep switching back and forth if it's going to be here or not.
It's hard to keep up with whether it's the planning commission, the zoning commission.
Well,
you
technically,
guys.
We're just an agent of the state on this.
Right.
We're not here as ZBA.
For many years, it was depending on the size of the community. If you were a smaller community, it went to the planning and zoning. If you were larger, it went here. So I think all of that, in that bouncing back and forth with the history of where to go, led the legislature to do what it did in 2003 and straighten it out. But of course,
yeah,
that didn't happen.
In the description of all the other documents that I was reading through, I mean,
oh, I think
you
put it on the record.
I'm under the impression it's only mechanical work.
That's correct.
Okay, and that then you would, so that the building department and the fire marshal would be in.
The fire marshal's already been out. We're trying to schedule with the building inspector now.
Do you have a report from the fire marshal?
We don't have a written report. He was out there the end of last week with one of the executrixes.
I think it was Wednesday, and I was there with the fire marshal, the assistant fire marshal, Scott Ellis. Scott Ellis, and he passed. He said he'll give any documentation required.
Do what?
He has to sign off, I believe.
He has to sign off on the application.
On the application.
There was a few items that he wanted addressed. He spoke directly to the owners. They agreed to do them. And then the information I had, he was going to go back out and inspect to make sure those were done. And then he was satisfied and he would sign off on the application.
What about the building department? Do they have to be involved?
They have to go out and inspect as well, yes.
Have they done that?
As I say, I've contacted, I forgot Janice's last name. I've worked with her in the past.
Poulin.
Right. And I left a message for her today. She'll get back to me and we'll arrange for that inspection. Those two inspections are separate and apart from what you do. It's a three-pronged system now. Used to be just you had to sign off, not you, Mary Ann.
Just me.
Yeah. And now it's all, the building department needs to sign off, the fire marshal needs to sign off separately, and then, of course, the zoning board of appeals needs to sign off separately.
So all of the licensing that was in the past was all for 710?
No, that's the license are given for the location of the business address. So 710 is the business address that he gave when he did. But my understanding is that there's information in the file from the planning department that the storage of cars was used at 718.
The problem that lies with us right now is there is no license for automotive work on either property, which means,
In what respect do you?
because the license has now expired, correct?
It was handed back in when he passed away.
So these properties have now been disenjoined, they've become legal.
The estate hasn't continued the use, that's the
Right.
question.
There's no one there to operate it, but no.
But
They
they've
haven't
now come
abandoned
into-
it as a
they've
use,
now come
though.
into compliance.
No. To the extent that these are, well, first of all, that's an issue for motor vehicle to determine. And to the extent that these are, let's say, non-conforming uses, the fact that Mr. Porcello died and his estate handed the licenses back in, and they're set to expire in a few months. They were set to expire, I think, in August of this year anyway. Doesn't mean that the use has been abandoned or the permits can't be reinstated.
Correct. I understand that. But the fact that past practice doesn't actually have to take place. If you put a shed on a property, for instance, and you have it for a period of 5 years and you don't get caught, you get to keep your shed there. You take your shed
3 years.
down.
Yep.
Now it falls into compliance. You don't get to put your shed back up.
Actually, the legislature just passed a law where that's no longer the case, but I don't think it's relevant to our discussion tonight.
But,
We're talking about
but there's
sheds?
no automotive use on property number 718 at this moment.
There's no current
Therefore-
there's no current automotive use on either property. There's no use other than the buildings are sitting there.
Right.
Because
but
the licenses were handed in.
But now they're two separate properties again. There's no license for property 710 or 718. So the fact that somebody in the past used them together and got away with it, but now they're two separate properties.
Oh,
There's
no.
nobody doing business on the
If
property.
you look at and I just had a case in Windsor Locks where we challenged the interpretation by the Motor Vehicle Department of a statute. The statute for licensing permits automotive activities to take place on adjacent parcels. They don't have to be all on one parcel. And in that case, we argued over what the word adjacent meant, because we said that the word adjacent included across the street, and they said no, they had to be touching. That's, to my interpretation, that's abutting. After we won that case at the Motor Vehicle Department, the Motor Vehicle Department went in and tried to change the statute to change the word adjacent to abut. But in either case, we've got two abutting parcels. They certainly are adjacent, and under motor vehicle regulations, they can be operated as one automotive entity, one use, one operation. And that's the way they have, as I understand, traditionally been used. I can't imagine that looking at 710, if you're going to separate the parcels, where would you sell used cars off of 710? There is no room to do to sell used cars.
And I understand
The building takes up
That
the
would
entire.
mean you wouldn't do it.
And I
Yeah,
understand
you would do
that.
it on 718. That's where the room was. That's
But
where the
so
used
are
cars
you
were.
basically coming back and saying that maybe you want to
Combine
these properties?
But I don't have any authority, because they're not my properties, to say we're going to merge them. But I'm saying under motor vehicle regulations, two adjacent, and certainly these two are adjacent, can be licensed together to constitute one motor vehicle
But are you saying they
operation.
could be, doesn't mean they will be, or they should be?
Well, that's up to motor vehicle to decide.
No, I understand that, but our town regs don't, correct me if I'm wrong, they don't lend to using two properties for one business, which I understand that in the past this was, but is no longer.
Well,
Well,
I would challenge that because first of all, Macy's sits on its own parcel, but I don't know anybody who wouldn't walk through the mall to get to Macy's. So, but in any event, whatever has occurred, just because Mr. Porcello has passed away, I don't think that those rights have been abandoned. How could they possibly be abandoned just because he passed away? Especially under the statute that was amended last year. You recall that the zoning statute on non-conforming uses said that there had to be evidence of intent, right? You couldn't just say there, because a lot of towns had a statute or a regulation that said, if you stop using your parcel for a year or 2 years, we're going to consider it abandoned for that use. They passed a law many years ago that said, no, you can't claim an intent to abandon without looking at the owner's intent, what they intended. And actually last year they strengthened that. So it's almost impossible now to claim that a non-conforming use loses its status unless you get a written declaration from the property owner saying, I intend to abandon this use.
I think
I understand what you're, I understand what you're.
Go ahead, you had something to say?
So we did receive, those are questions that I asked the town attorney, and Maria Elston, our assistant town attorney, got back to us on. Basically, she said she's sort of assuming that they were already approved to be used together. So it's sort of an existing nonconformity, and the parking lot that's fenced in on 718 was approved as part of the Porcello's operation, which was across both sites. So since that variance sort of runs with the land, that parking area was approved to be part of the operation over on the other side of the property line. So again, so I know that there was some sort of question as to what ZBA can look at in regards to automotive location approvals, and the other piece of the answer that Maria gave us was that would also be a question for compliance with the zoning regulations. And under the what she told us about the facts and the relevant history regarding automotive location approvals, the ZBA is acting as an arm of the state. It's a limited scope as to what you're looking at here.
Okay, can we hold a minute so we can get everybody on the same page? It's this document that was left at your desk. Yeah, this is what you want to follow along with. And I don't think that you've had time to read it. So I'm going to ask, before you continue, if you can hold the thought, to the chairman, can we take 5 minutes and just stop for a second so we can read this thing, so that what you explain.
Do I have a second?
I'll make a second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 5 minutes. All right, so, from what I understood from her answer was if there was a part of the property next door that was allowed to be used, which would have been the fenced-in area, not the whole property, the fenced-in area. Correct?
Correct.
So, it's safe to say that anything outside that fenced-in area was never given approval to be used.
It's
They were
not
given a variance for that area.
right. It was not. It's not in our records that was a use. We also have the 1994 Department of Motor Vehicles Dealers and Repairs paperwork that was also part of that packet that you just reviewed that shows the address of storage area if different from business address, which has a number of addresses listed on it from 1994 that also included 710 and 718 Enfield Street, and it details that the storage area is fenced in with chain link.
Right, that would be the recovery area, right?
Right.
Both addresses?
Where's the document from 1994?
That's right here.
It's on the back page.
This.
Right behind the
Right.
the memo. Okay.
Okay.
So it does list that part of that parcel could be used, and it specifies in the chain link fence.
Just storage area is different from business area address. The storage area is different from business address. So they have all these different numbers. They have 710, 699, 704, and 718. But this is why I'm confused. The attorney just got done telling us that all of these documents didn't mean anything because they're coming in under the need for new.
Right, so it's just helping us to assess what the approved uses were for zoning purposes. So that because of these uses were already established, that's why they don't have to go back to planning and zoning for approval. So they're here for the automotive location approval from you.
If I may, for the record, I don't think I said they didn't mean anything. I said that they're here, I guess, to establish the historical point of what portions of both properties were used for the automotive use. What I said was that the licenses themselves are personal in nature, so that every new operator has to get their own license. That was my point. I would bring to your attention, and I can give you this. This is a copy of the actual variance that was granted. And to the extent I may have misspoke, let me read what it actually says. January 1982, which predates the 94 document by 12 years. That the premises at 718 Enfield Street, at the time was owned by Caligera Porcello, was granted a variance of section 11-3 and 11-4 of the Enfield zoning ordinance to permit installation of an accessory parking area within 9 feet of a resident district's boundaries within premises located at 718 Enfield Street, Enfield, Connecticut. Approval is subject to the following stipulations. A 6-foot chain link fence will be constructed by applicant to the north of the boundary of the subject parcel. Approval is subject to compliance in all other respects with the zoning ordinance. So the variance was to allow, I guess, a parking area to be either constructed or enlarged to within a certain distance of a boundary line. The only condition was that the chain link fence along the north side. It was nothing about enclosing the entire area. It was just that the chain link fence along that northerly boundary be constructed. So this would be in this area. I assume that the rest of the chain link fence was in this area, constructed probably pursuant to that 94 motor vehicle document that you have in your possession. So I don't know that we can say with any certainty that the area outside the chain link fence was never used as accessory parking for this business. It's not clear from the record that that's the case. I don't think we can say that.
Do you have a copy, Jen? Through you to her. Do you have a copy of this variance?
I'll have, if you don't have one, you got one?
I have the file right here.
Oh, okay. That's the notice that's recorded in volume 465, page 331.
Do you need my phone?
Oh, that's actually.
Where I'm confused is where's the 9 feet? There's nothing here marked 9 feet. This backyard here is 108, 103 feet. The side is 103 feet. Where's 9 feet?
Is it right here?
The variance reads that they're allowing accessory parking within 9 feet of a residential property. I don't know this for sure, but my assumption is that they were granted a variance because the requirement was that you can't park within 9 feet of the residential zone.
So it has nothing to do with, I'm not finding anything about this chain link fence in this impound lot yet.
That variance allows the chain link fenced area to be where it is as an accessory parking area, and it's the 1994 DMV paperwork that shows that at 718 Enfield Street, the parking over there was a storage area different from the business address that was fenced in with a chain link fence.
See, what they were approved for was not what they asked for. They asked for the buffer to be reduced from 25 feet to 9 feet. And from 15 feet to 9 feet. But when they wrote their wording for the variance, they said that they could park within 9 feet. So they were granted what they didn't ask for.
Anyway, can we,
That's great.
So again, I think that what they're referring to is they said, you can park in this area here as an accessory use for the automotive use at 710, as long as you construct essentially this fence along the northerly boundary. That's how the actual document recording on land records reads. So.
well,
Any other questions?
Right.
Yes.
Jen, do we have any reports or records of any pedestrian accidents or anything along that sidewalk?
We haven't received a report from the traffic safety officer on this, but we can certainly ask for one.
Okay.
This newest version of the site plan came in on Thursday, so.
Okay. And I noticed, looking at a map, there's a church across the street. And is there a school associated with that church, a parochial school?
No, not as far as we know.
Okay. And then the last question, any other notable public gathering spaces nearby that may be impacted by additional traffic? Theaters, playgrounds, et cetera? No? Okay.
No.
Anything else?
So normally we would give you some sort of staff report, but I guess we were waiting more for information from the town attorney, which we received today, and also in discussion with town attorney's office, you guys are not bound to the zoning statutes regarding time limits on these applications. So if you wanted to table it to get things like reports from traffic safety or more information, or a staff report if you wanted one, that's certainly within your right to do so as well.
Anybody? I just have a lot of concerns with the fact that there's no parking put on our blueprints, other than the 4 spaces. And, we don't know how, there's zoning regulations that are gonna say you need X amount of parking for employees and parking for this, and, I mean, we don't know what it is you want. We don't know, I mean, you could essentially, we say yes, these 2 areas could be crammed full of cars. And we have no say in that after that. I mean, there needs to be, in my mind, there needs to be some way of you telling us, look, we're gonna have X amount of cars on this property. And right now, you're telling me you're gonna have 4 cars.
Well, obviously, that's not the case.
See what I'm saying? I mean, you're asking me to approve blindly.
I don't think that's the case. I mean, what I'm asking you to do is to apply the statutory requirements under the motor vehicle statutes and determine whether this use is suitable at this location.
But I
Now,
don't.
how you do that is between you and whatever advice you get from the town attorney. My thoughts on that would be it's going to be as suitable as it was last year, and the year before, and the year before that.
But I don't
Going
know
back
what the
many years.
impact is gonna be to traffic, both vehicle, pedestrian. I don't know how many cars you guys plan on moving.
Yeah, like any business, it's not, since the business is working on vehicles, there is no regulation that I'm aware of that talks about, well, you're limited to working on only 3 vehicles at a time because you only have parking spaces for 3. I mean, a successful business could have many more vehicles at any given time on the location. I can tell you in the past, we added the parking spaces at Mr. O'Brien's request. I think his directive to me was, well, where are you going to park the cars that you're going to sell? And I said, okay, I'll show you where I'm going to do that. And that's why you got the amended plan in front of you. So we arranged to have 4 parking spaces for the inventory, so to speak, along that southerly boundary. So you're suggesting that, and I'm not disagreeing with you, I want to make sure you'd like us to show where I can park 20 more cars, 30 more cars, or?
Well,
Yeah,
I'd like to see some type of a parking scheme.
Mhm.
I mean, honestly, I know if we approve this, and you know yourself, this isn't your first time doing something like this. We say, go ahead, you got our stamp of approval. You got those 4 spots, and then you're gonna have used cars all over the place anyway.
Well,
Because we say, okay.
I'm limited by the room. I can't park in the state right away.
But you haven't shown us a parking scheme
Yeah.
that says this lot will hold this many cars so that we can approve you to hold 20 cars. So that if we don't approve you to hold 20 cars, you can put 60 on there.
Yeah, but
I'm limited by the physical space.
But I'm looking at this differently than he is.
Yep.
I'm looking as strictly as safety. Okay, you didn't give us parking, I get that. I've already done, just in what we've chatted, I'm up to 22 just to have people come to work and do whatever they do. Okay, you're up to 22 required parking spaces, okay, for a variety of reasons. And this is a tough location, the way it sits right now. And looking at the documents from the 30,000 view that we are, because we're looking at certificate of suitability, just because it was, doesn't make it make it easy any longer.
Well,
I mean, it's a safety problem.
That's a determination that you're supposed to make. So.
Okay, well.
So if you'd like us to get more information, but my problem is I can't, look, between the right-of-way, the edge of the right-of-way and the buildings, legally, I don't think I can, other than maybe a couple of spaces out there in parallel, sort of perpendicular, or sorry, parallel to the road, there's no room for spaces there.
Right.
Yeah, that's very obvious.
There's
You can't park on Carpet Street. the old way of doing business is what you're telling me is maybe not the best way, but it was jockeying cars around to make it work. So the question, I guess, is how much of the recovery area, the impound area, do we want to use for these other uses, and which means that we can't operate the towing business, and that's a business decision for my client to
But
make.
Attorney Landolina, you know that that's not once we're looking at it from 30,000 feet.
Yep.
And all we can do is say, is this property the right property to do what you're asking us? What
Right.
you end up doing on it after we move forward,
Mm-hmm.
we can't control you. We can't put any conditions on
understand that,
you.
but if
and you don't have to go to planning and zoning, so they don't have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really, it's not feeling good.
Understood. What I'm suggesting is that, again, I agree with Jennifer that there were timelines in the old statute, 65 days. Those are now gone when the statute disappeared. So if you want these other things, we can push this off to are you meeting in July?
But I don't think you've already told us there's no place on this property to find parking.
No, the only thing I'm suggesting, and I'd have to talk to my client, if he was to tear down the fence to enclose the impound area,
You mean get rid of the impound area
Correct.
and not have a towing service?
not having towing,
Right.
then he might be able to make.
But you didn't come here with that.
Right.
No,
That's
but I'm
something,
saying-
if you want to withdraw right now.
I can't do that without
and-
speaking to my client.
And work with the planning staff, that's up
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, and I'm not speaking for the board.
Yeah.
Personally, I'd like to see some type of parking
Yeah,
scheme.
but why does it have to be one or the other? In other words, since there's no pressure to close anything,
Well, I do, but I'm
You
sorry.
you can table this yourself. If you would like us to table it, you can ask for that. If you would like the board to table it, you can ask us to do it.
I would like to make a motion that we just make a decision. What are the rest of you thinking?
what? Excuse me 1 second.
But I'm for you. I'm with you.
Okay.
Could I ask a question of staff? through you?
Absolutely.
So, are we like overstepping our scope here by asking for what wasn't asked for before?
You're allowed to ask for parking as it pertains to effect on traffic, taking into account
Public safety.
pedestrians, public safety, even like the width of the roadways around there. So that is a key piece in determining impact. So you can ask for that.
But what could possibly be different?
The
And the
applicant.
road is the road.
The applicant could call out on his site plan different locations where there would be designated parking for tenant space, no parking in certain areas within the, along Route 5 where the state right-of-way is in front of the building, and a designated parking area for vehicles that are going to be worked on by the garage itself. They have enough area here for those to be worked on. There's no call-out here on the site plan at all for any tenant space. The obvious sidewalks in front of the building are a danger to pedestrian traffic, backing in and then pulling out. So if you call those out, maybe you can take more consideration into looking at this in a different view as it stands right now, anyways.
It sounds to me that we're looking at possibly just get rid of the impound lot and the variance would go away and they would be using that space for something different and then you wouldn't have a towing. But we understand from our 30,000 view that we do not have control of what they can and cannot do at the business once they move forward with this application or certificate of suitability. So even if they come back and tell us that, and they put them on the plans, we still would not be able to have any.
Authority to bind it.
Thank you. Because we don't have that right. And we can't add conditions as it was written from our attorney's information, because he can say he accepts them, but we have no teeth to make him do it. Which means we don't have any teeth to give to you.
Well, you wouldn't have to under the current zoning regulations. If there's a violation of the zoning regulations, then that would be addressed.
But what zoning regulations would he be violating since he were acting as if this is a grandfathered site?
Right, be continuing some of the nonconformities, but not all of them.
You're trying to tell us to pick and choose. I see it as a huge safety issue because Route 5 is no longer a one way, and the pedestrians do walk up and down. And right now, just during our dialogue, I've kept a running list. We're at 22 required parking spaces, and that's not really with just customers coming and going. So,
I'm not sure that that count is accurate. I don't.
well,
what
you
do
could work on a number.
But even so, it doesn't mitigate the fact that in order to show you spaces for tenant parking and all the other things that you want to see, whether it's 14 or 20 or whatever, I have to encroach into the impound area. That's the only way that it works.
But
And then there's a safety issue in the front of the building with your 2 bays there. Because you're backing out onto the sidewalk or pulling into the sidewalk constantly. And you have more pedestrian traffic today than you did.
I can't change that fact. That's a fact of the parcel and the way that it was constructed.
So Jen, since this isn't a public hearing, I'm not exactly sure what you do. How do we move?
A motion to approve.
Okay, well, you could, if you wanted to see the spaces, if you feel like seeing the spaces on a map would help you make a decision, you can table it. If you feel like you don't need to see those spaces, you can
No, that's not what I meant.
choose-
Normally, and I'll turn to you, normally you'll close the public hearing.
Right, there would be a motion, we would just make
Right.
a motion to
Yeah,
approve.
so you would just
Okay.
make your motion
So
now.
somebody, if somebody wants to make if we're done with discussion, and somebody wants to make a motion, then you make a motion to approve, and then we move.
So just,
there.
just to clarify the question, if we make a motion to approve, we can't, there's no conditions that can be set. And even if there were conditions that could be set, there's no mechanism of enforcement. So essentially, it's just go ahead and then
It's out of our hands.
it's done.
Right, that is what the memo from
Right.
town
Okay.
attorneys has said.
So do I have a motion on the table?
I make a motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Made by Mary Ann, seconded by Andrew. Any discussion?
It's a clear safety matter. I can't see how you fix it, but, and from 30,000 feet, it's traffic, width of Route 5, pedestrians.
It's a different road than it was in 1958 is what I think it comes back to, that significant change in circumstances in the neighborhood since it was approved.
And I don't, with that, with both of those things being said, we don't know how many cars are gonna move. As a used car dealer, we could, they could essentially fill this whole thing with used cars. Once we say go, we have no control.
Right.
And we haven't been shown parking except for 4 parking spaces. So you don't know how unsafe it could get.
Right, and we have the safety issue of moving from parcel to parcel because they don't truly
Right, they
connect.
don't.
So
They
going
butt up
over the
against
road-
each other, but they have to come out onto the road, back over and back onto the road.
Right.
And then again, we have more pedestrian traffic and we're still backing out and pulling into the front base. So again, that's coming off
What's
of
the
Route
next
5.
step?
So, anybody have anything else? All in favor, signify by raising your right hand. All opposed? Motion does not carry.
Thank you.
It's denied.
Denied.
Okay. Time to get a tire.
Have a good night.
Did you guys want your site plan back?
So how you write this up, Mary?
I don't know. Okay,
Exactly what was stated.
I don't have one of those memories.
There's been a significant change in circumstances since 1958,
Right.
meaning both the increased traffic.
Hold on a minute.
Both vehicle and pedestrian.
Right. And then the necessity to continually move the cars. Got it. Over the public way and through the pedestrian areas.
And let me know when you're ready.
Go ahead.
And the inability on their plans to see any type of parking scheme that would allow us to know how many cars are gonna be moved through this property.
So for car movement and parking,
Right.
now, let's see if I can read my own writing. There has been a significant change to the property since the 1950s. The increase in traffic, pedestrian safety, they continue to need to, their continued need to move cars over the public way and the pedestrian area, and the inability on their plans for car movement and the need for parking.
Wait a
Is
minute.
that- Go ahead.
I think really you need to incorporate in there that there's been a significant
Change in circumstance.
circumstances in the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Right.
I need that. I need that.
Oh, lost my agenda.
I probably took it.
I put mine aside somewhere, but now it's blended into the.
Jen, I'm
Oh,
gonna
we got
probably
one
rewrite
for you.
this before we leave.
Oh, you got it
but
back.
I found it.
I'll put it on the back. Okay, so we made a motion.
That's what I
Yep.
put in the motion, was the change to the neighborhood.
Right, but who made it?
You made it,
made it.
Andrew seconded it.
Okay. I'll rewrite it and make it clean so she could read it.
What do we all need to sign?
All right.
No, I'll just write it on the back.
In our packets, we have the minutes for our April 30th meeting.
Hold on a minute. I need to get with you.
Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Made by Mary Ann, seconded by Andrew. Any discussion? Sensing none, all those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Opposed? Minutes have been approved. Staff report. You're up.
So we provided you guys with the updated, you had requested the updated list of your pending, or your already approved applications, the status of where they're at. So we gave you that, and also the certificate of zoning compliance for the Midas muffler, to show you that that is set. Other than that, We don't have any pending applications in the office, so if you guys have any questions for us.
Let's see. Who's on our agenda? Do we have an update on the cars in the mall parking lot yet?
Yes,
It grew.
it did grow. And yes, it's being addressed probably by the end of this week with all the dealerships
Thank you.
and the mall. There's a new management company, so we're dealing with them too.
Okay. A couple other items. I noticed across the street, they're parking on the lawn. The cars are not on the
They
lawn.
have already been issued a citation.
Okay, because they're still there today.
I understand that.
Okay.
But
There seems to
mail
be.
only goes so fast.
I understand. I just wanted to make sure we put it in our
Yeah.
notes. There seems to be a proliferation of golf size signs, and they're just popping up everywhere. There seems to be a big pile of them that are happening on the. Where's Big Y? What's that one?
Palumba.
Palumba.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of them up there.
They're getting crazy over there. Yeah, I know you have nothing to do, but maybe we can let them know that they're not supposed to do this and stop doing it.
We have, and if you check the dumpster out there, you'll see about 50 or 60 out in the dumpster just within the past 2 weeks. It's just crazy.
Do we have an update on the parking of the Christie property? The last time we were here, you were saying you were holding back because they had all kinds of things they were gonna do, but we had asked them to mark the parking spaces and things like that.
The parking deals with, it's the overall site plan for the property in itself. There was a requirement under planning and zoning for the striping of the parking lot. So they have an extended period of time to complete the project. They've taken care of some of the issues with the buffer zone and moved some of the stuff, and they're still continuing to work on site to fall in step with the approvals that planning and zoning set.
Anything else?
Those are the items I had in our.
Quick question.
Go ahead.
Just for my knowledge, who's in charge of the blight enforcement in terms of mowing now?
We still have 2 individuals that are handling blight.
Okay.
The clean and lean are still being handled by them and also by one of the individuals here to set that up.
Yeah. If I send
she's
you an
moving-
address with one that hasn't, where part of the yard hasn't been mowed all year and it's bank owned, and you can get it to the right person.
Yeah, we can,
Or I can give you the address
Yep.
now. 52 South Road.
52 South?
Yeah, the rear third of the lot's not mowed, and it looks like crap, and you can
Okay.
see it from the street. Yeah, around my parents' property. So I can look at it.
So I
Okay.
did-
Anybody can see
I
it.
did see that we got a certificate of zoning compliance, so we can see that that property was finished up. I forgot which one it was that we got, but
It's Midas.
Midas.
Midas, that's the one.
It's nice.
So that's good. Anything else?
That's it.
No other business. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Made by Charlie, seconded by Mary Ann. Any discussion?
Nope.
All
We're
in
done.
favor, signify by raising your right hand. Opposed? We are adjourned.
Right.